Welcome back to Q Dads, it's me Ste, and yes, the final episode of From was actually pretty good, mostly down to the last 15 minutes or so, but well worth it. Not only are we going to be discussing what this means to actually have seen the man in yellow, but also we're going to be discussing the different versions of Julie. She did allude to changing the story, and I think this is storywalker Julie. So strap yourselves in guys, because this is probably going to be the one breakdown that we've not actually moaned in. Well, I still think there are a few things to moan about. But don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let us know your thoughts on how this show ended. And of course, at the very end, I'll be touching on this new series that they teased, Earth Abided, which is something that Ben is going to be covering on the 1st of December. So the episode ends with the reveal of the man in yellow. Now, I must admit that this was a huge surprise. I did not expect him to appear in this episode at all, and then at the very end he's there heading towards Jim. Now I will touch on Julie in just a moment, but as for the man in yellow, his look was quite frightening and he seemed to recognise Jim and the events we've seen so far in the episodes, as he did mention that his wife shouldn't have dug a hole, which seemed to help spur all this on. And in an even bigger surprise twist, he kills Jim. Now, again, this is something I did not expect, but I don't think this is the last we'll see of Jim, as future/storywalker Julie does state that this was supposed to happen. So could this scene have been a premonition, or similar to how she's helped Boyd in the past, could she have just stumbled on the memory? Either way, she's going to be changing this event, and I think Jim will return, but more on Julie in just a moment. And of course, the men in yellow seems like a higher entity than those we've seen previously. It does feel like the monsters are the ones calling the shot, or in Ben's opinion, Martin, but this man in yellow seems to walk with more power. He seemed to be slightly more dangerous, and maybe the song that Jade and Tabby played actually unlocked the next layer to all of this and opened up a new door to this game, ultimately freeing the man in yellow. Which means that Jade never meant to play that song. And I say this because of a theory that the man in yellow plants the seed to the faraway tree, and over time has been setting up this puzzle in a hope that someone would free him. Now, just a second ago, I mentioned the man in yellow had been freed, but who locked him away? In this episode, it was confirmed, as we theorised to back at the start of the season, that the children on the stone tablets were used as sacrifice for immortality of the monsters back when they were still human. So, with that in mind, did they get their powers from the man in yellow directly? Or, in some weird twist, did they lock the man in yellow away and ultimately siphon a bit of his power to themselves? Are we about to get a season 4 where the man in yellow is not only after the people in Fromville, but also the monsters? Either way, I think things from here are going to become even more dangerous. Now, let's talk about Julie for a moment, because this is a different version of Julie, or as we've been calling her, storywalker Julie. And if you're thinking, what? Look at the fact her hair was completely different. She had scratches down her cheek, and I'm pretty convinced she was wearing different clothes. And if you recall back to when Julie and Ethan were talking in the diner, they mentioned about changing the story, and Ethan said you can't change a story once it's already been written, and also noted that Julie is a storywalker. So this either means that Julie went back to those ruins, somehow did something which altered the events, and then put her on a different path. A path that somehow Jim has walked into, and that's the only bit I can't seem to piece together. Is this a new version of the book with a different Julie and a different Tabby, and with a man in yellow roaming free? Or is it the fact that this Julie we see is in fact a different Julie altogether, and is he the storywalker? Julie then is nipping in and out of different timelines or chapters of a book, as we're going to call it now, to change the events of history, or at least put them on a different track. Now I say this because what if this storywalker Julie nipped in here not to save Jim from the man in yellow, but to lead the man in yellow, because of Jim's death ultimately creates something else a little bit further down the line, and this storywalker Julie with her new hair has obviously been doing this for a long time and has figured out a way to alter not only her own story but other people's stories or different realities. Either way, I'd love to hear your thoughts on storywalker Julie, so please let us know below. Ben envisions her to be hopping through different versions of the From book until she finds the first edition, and ends it all. And then, of course, we have to talk about another twist, which for us probably wasn't a twist because we had predicted reincarnation many times in our videos, and many times we've been told we were wrong as well. But yet it is confirmed that Jade is the reincarnation of Christopher and Tabby is the reincarnation of Miranda, and they've been repeating this cycle from the very offset. The first time that this ever happened, one of their children was sacrificed, and the words Ankui actually means remember. And like I said, Ben and I have called this before, so it wasn't that much of a big shock, and actually I was a little bit deflated by it if I'm honest, but I think the ending of the new Julie and Man in Yellow made up for that. But regardless, the big question here is, why are Jade and Tabby being reincarnated? As I'm pretty sure in the episode, it said you had to sacrifice your child for immortality. So if their child was sacrificed, why are they not monsters too? Or just like how the Smiler monster was reincarnated, is this Jade and Tabby's version? As ultimately they did not want their child sacrificed, but are still cursed by the event. I think this makes much more sense, and it would then give it reason to happen to them. Now let's talk about Fatima's baby and how the spirit looked like it was still taking it along in the sack and carried it through into the basement, which was a series of caves, again something we mentioned last week, and Boyd then follows. Now this scene I both enjoyed and did not enjoy. I enjoyed it for the fact that the baby turned into another version of the Smiler, bringing him back. This is because he died, so to naturally bring him back was an eye for an eye, but obviously this was all about rebirth and reincarnation. The part I didn't enjoy and was very disappointed in is that Boyd didn't do anything in that moment. I feel like he could have just shot his gun a few times in at least an attempt to kill someone or the Smiler and then run for his life. But no, he didn't, and it was just a bit disappointing. And of course, I was disappointed with him as well when he was interrogating Elgin because he didn't seem to do a good enough job. It was like he'd hit his hand a few times and then was like, okay, let's go downstairs for a chat. And it was just really deflating. But I was very relieved to see Sarah coming and actually getting down to the grittiness of it. This is what I've wanted for the whole series. Someone to just actually follow through with their actions that they said they are going to do. So Sarah, good on you. I'm proud. One thing I will say though, is the rebirth of Smiler actually answered a question. And that was, why are the monsters in 1950s outfit? And now I think that's because that was the last time they were all reincarnated. I'm going to assume Smiler's new outfit, as he was naked at the end, will be some more modern clothes. I assume 80s stuff, as that's the stuff from Victor's childhood, and we have seen that he's down in the tunnels, like how Jasper was. The thing is though, if that is the case, it does mean at some point Jade and Miranda were able to kill all the monsters, only for them to fail to stop, I assume, the Man in Yellow right at the end. Again, let me know your thoughts on this. So yes, overall it was actually an enjoyable episode. I love the way they're starting to turn on each other, especially with Elgin's torture. I'm very glad they introduced the Man in Yellow. We speculated about him as he was in the pictures at the start of the season, and we just kind of put him aside because it was never really mentioned. So we didn't think too much of it, so it was actually a nice surprise to have him in this episode. The children who all came together for Jade and Tabitha, I'm not really convinced on. I think they kind of dragged that story out for a bit too long and it felt a little bit meh. But then the introduction of Julie, the storywalker, was actually quite interesting and intriguing to have. And then obviously the return of Smiler. So overall, not a bad episode. But of course, now it's over to your thoughts in the comments. What did you enjoy about this season? Do you think that Julie has been to several different chapters or different versions of this book? Or do you think this is her first time seeing someone else? And what do you think the Man in Yellow is? Is he more powerful than the entities we've already seen? Or is this just a different version of the town? And instead of monsters, this town has the Man in Yellow. Now, before I go, I do want to talk about this little sneak peek they did on a show called Earthaboids. Now, I must say that I didn't know anything about this show, so when I first watched it, I was very intrigued. It started off as we see Alexander Ludwig, as he seems to be digging or mining for some type of mineral. He's then bitten by a rattlesnake, and then I've got to say I'm confused on the time of this, because it seems to us that it was around about a week, maybe a few days, that he's been in and out of consciousness after the bite. But then, of course, after he wakes up, he tries to go back to town to see that essentially the world has ended, and everyone around you is dead or gone. But this decay seems to have happened a little bit too fast to just be a few days, or unless some kind of virus or something has gotten to them first. Now, This point again, I don't know what the show is going to be about. Does it include zombies, or does it just include crazy people at the end of the world? I'm not sure, but we're going to be doing a little bit of research for this, and then Ben's going to be covering this from the 1st of December. So if it sounds like something that you're into, because it was a nice, genuine surprise for us, then don't forget to subscribe, as I'll be keeping you up to date with that too. And also, Silo is continuing to carry on, with episode 3 coming out in 2 days' time, so you don't want to miss our breakdown on that. Don't forget to hit that like button as well, and as always, we'll catch you next time with something new.